In our review of the Old Testament and typology, we started with Moses and the prophet like Moses and Jesus as being a type of Moses. We discussed the Passover and particularly the Passover lamb and Jesus as fulfilling the being the antitype of the Passover lamb. We also talked about manna being a supernatural food from heaven and Jesus being the manna from heaven, the new manna from heaven. We also talked about Melchizedek as being a type and Jesus as being the antitype, with Melchizedek offering bread and wine as a sacrificial meal with Abraham. Then also, although it's not typological, we talked about the blood of the covenant. So that covenants must be sealed by blood. Blood was used to seal the Mosaic covenant. And then Jesus referred to the new covenant of his blood, with his blood sealing the new covenant. And of course, that blood has to be, in the case of the Mosaic covenant, that blood has to be sprinkled on the people. In the case of the new covenant, it has to be consumed. So tonight I wanted to talk about the bread of the presence, which will be our final Old Testament typological topic. And then discuss the Eucharistic controversy, starting with Paschasius Radbertus and the opposition to him from Ratramnus, and then the views of Berengarius and the opposition to him from virtually everybody. Then also, it occurred to me in sometime this week that we've been presenting apologetics in the context of defending the faith against our separated brethren. But the problem is here with the Eucharist is that 70% of Catholics don't believe in the real presence either. So only a majority of Catholics believe in the real presence. Admittedly, the proportion of people who believe the Eucharist is symbolic is greater among non-regular churchgoers than among regular churchgoers. I don't remember what the proportions were. I think they were something like 80% of but they were still like 30 to 35% of churchgoers, which is, shocking. So, so defending the Catholic belief in the Eucharist, or the traditional belief in the Eucharist for that matter, is more than something to do in opposition to our separated brethren. It's also something to do in relationship to fellow Catholics who don't believe in the real presence. And in that case, the question is, how can they actually believe in any part of the faith? Since the Eucharist, according to the Catechism, is the source and the summit of our Christian faith. So, are there any questions?
Maybe a CD needs to be created and just mailed automatically to all the parishioners. And maybe they'll listen to it.
Maybe. I mean, it's actually probably easier to put up a YouTube video.
That's right.
The problem with the CD is that at this point, a lot of people don't have CD readers.
No,
Let's return to the bread of the presence. Is it clear where the bread of the presence is and how it's organized in the temple?
Behind the curtain?
No, it's not behind the curtain. It's in front of the curtain. So
Okay.
there's the holy place. The holy place has the ark of the. I'm sorry. There's the holy of holies.
Mhm.
The holy of holies contains the ark of the covenant with the mercy seat. And in the ark of the covenant is manna, Aaron's um,
Rod,
rod that budded, and there's something else too.
the tablets.
Yeah, the tablets. Exactly. Good. So then the holy place is sealed off by a very thick, tall, heavy curtain that requires multiple people to pull. I've forgotten its dimensions, but it's very thick. And the high priest can, and only the high priest, can enter the holy place on the Day of Atonement to sacrifice a bull for his sins and a goat for the sins of the people. And other than that, the holy place is off limits. So outside of the holy place is the Holy of Holies, which is where sacrifices typically occur. So the entrance to the holy place is on the east. The bread of the presence is on the north side. The table for the bread of the presence is on the north side of the holy place. And the lampstand is on the south side opposite the table. And its purpose is to illuminate the table that contains the bread of the presence, which is also called the bread of the face of God.
Hmm.
So let's take a look at these things. In Exodus chapter 25, verse 9, God says to Moses, according to all that I show you concerning the pattern of the tabernacle and of all its furniture, so you shall make it. So the traditional interpretation, the understanding of that in both Judaism and Christianity, and in fact, it's explicitly articulated in Hebrews, is that in some form, God was giving Moses the instructions for creating a tabernacle that would be a copy of the heavenly sanctuary. So this is in some form a copy of the heavenly sanctuary. So it's not the heavenly sanctuary. So the bread of the presence, the table for the bread of the presence is described in Exodus chapter 25, verses 23 through 30. And you shall make a table of acacia wood. 2 cubits shall be its length, a cubit its breadth, and a cubit and a half its height. You shall overlay it with pure gold and make a molding of gold around it. And you shall make around it a frame of a handbreadth wide and a molding of gold around the frame. And you shall make for it 4 rings of gold and fasten the rings to the corners at its 4 legs. Close to the frame, the rings shall lie as holders for the poles to carry the table. You shall make the poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold, and the table shall be carried with these. And you shall make its plates and dishes for incense, and its flagons and bowls with which to pour libations. Of pure gold you shall make them. And you shall set the bread of the presence on the table before me always. So there's bread, and the libations are wine. So bread and wine on the table of the bread of the presence. So the table contains spoons, plates, dishes for incense. So the incense is so that the odor from the sacrifice would rise to God. And then the lampstand is described in verses 31 through 40, the menorah. You shall make a lampstand of pure gold. The base and the shaft of the lampstand shall be made of hammered work. Its cups, its capitals, and its flowers shall be of one piece with it. And there shall be 6 branches going out of its sides, 3 branches of the lampstand out of one side of it, and 3 branches of the lampstand out of the other side of it. 3 cups made like almonds, each with capital and flower on one branch, and 3 cups made like almonds, each with capital and flower on the other branch. So for the 6 branches going out of the lampstand. And on the lampstand itself, 4 cups made like almonds, with their capitals and flowers, and a capital of one piece with it under each pair of the 6 branches going out from the lampstand. Their capitals and their branches shall be of one piece with it, the whole of it one piece of hammered work, pure gold. And you shall make the 7 lamps for it, and the lamps shall be set up so as to give light upon the space in front of it. Its snuffers and their trays shall be of pure gold. Of a talent of pure gold it shall be made, with all these utensils. And see that you make them after the pattern for them, which is being shown you on the mountain. Again, the command to make them after the pattern shown to Moses. So it's important that they follow the pattern. So the menorah has 7 branches. 7 represents a number of completion of God. 7 indicates also, the 7 branches collectively also indicate God's people, who are the face of the menorah. So you see the sort of typological symbolism there, that there are the 7 lights representing God's people to shine light on the bread of the presence, which is the bread of the face of God.
Well, that's still reasonable.
So if we look at Revelation, there in before the letter to the 7 churches, Jesus is going among the lampstands. And the significant thing about that imagery is that the lampstands illuminate Christ, and the lampstands represent us. So the point here of all of this imagery is that typologically, we are the lampstands who illuminate Christ. That's called the imitation of Christ. And so it's to burn continually. It's in Leviticus chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. Let's take a quick look, I think.
I guess so. Well, no, nobody, that's true.
What chapter, Ron?
24.
Well, possible.
Oh,
You know, I ended up with a cloth by head.
The Lord said to Moses, command the sons of Israel to bring you pure oil from beaten olives for the lamp, that a light may be kept burning continually. Outside the veil of the covenant, in the tent of meeting, Aaron shall keep it in order from evening to morning before the Lord continually. It shall be a statute forever through your generations. You shall keep the lamps in order upon the lampstand of pure gold before the Lord continually. So it's supposed to
I don't blame you.
to burn constantly. And it's the only source of light inside of the holy place. So it's a perpetual light that illumines the face of God. And the bread of the presence is described in Leviticus chapter 24, verses 5 through 9. You shall take fine flour and bake 12 cakes of it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in each cake. And you shall set them in 2 rows, 6 in a row, upon the table of pure gold. And you shall put pure frankincense with each row, that it may go with the bread as a memorial portion to be offered by fire to the Lord. Every Sabbath day, Aaron shall set it in order before the Lord continually on behalf of the sons of Israel as a covenant forever. And it shall be for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in a holy place, since it is for him a most holy portion out of the offerings by fire to the Lord, a perpetual debt. So the bread of the presence is put in on the table of the bread of the presence. It rests there for the week, and then on the following Sabbath, it's consumed by the priests. The cakes were also anointed with oil in their middle in the shape of a cross. So it's called the bread of the face of God because Moses was told to build the table immediately after the heavenly banquet on Mount Sinai. If you remember, we read that last week where Moses and a number of the elders of Israel ate and drank.
Yeah.
And so it's also a memorial of the divine banquet. So also, just as the tabernacle itself is a visible sign of the invisible heavenly place of God, the bread of the presence is a visible sign of the invisible heavenly face of God. The presence is also a sacrifice. It's a cereal offering, and it's a meal. Do we want to read about cereal offerings? Would that be useful?
Oh, while we're on it, sure, yeah.
Okay. Leviticus chapter 2, verses 1 through 16. Okay, so Leviticus chapter 2 on cereal offerings. When anyone brings a cereal offering as an offering to the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour. He shall pour oil upon it and put frankincense on it and bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests. And he shall take from it a handful of the fine flour and oil with all of its frankincense. And the priest shall burn this as its memorial portion upon the altar, an offering by fire, a pleasing odor to the Lord. And what is left of the cereal offering shall be for Aaron and his sons. It is a most holy part of the offerings by fire to the Lord. When you bring a cereal offering baked in the oven as an offering, it shall be unleavened cakes of fine flour. So unleavened cakes, very much like the unleavened bread of the Exodus, mixed with oil, or unleavened wafers spread with oil. And if your offering is a cereal offering baked on a griddle, it shall be of fine flour unleavened, mixed with oil. You shall break it in pieces and pour oil on it. It is a cereal offering. And if your offering is a cereal offering cooked in a pan, it shall be made of fine flour with oil. And you shall bring the cereal offering that is made of these things to the Lord. And when it is presented to the priest, he shall bring it to the altar. And the priest shall take it from the the priest shall take from the cereal offering its memorial portion and burn this on the altar, an offering by fire, a pleasing odor to the Lord. And what is left of the cereal offering shall be for Aaron and his sons. It is a most holy part of the offerings by fire to the Lord. And then it says that it has to be of, it can't be leavened flour. And And basically it's an offering for Thanksgiving. So it's offered every Sabbath, right? It's a Sabbath sacrifice. And it's not just any sacrifice. Leviticus describes it as a most holy portion out of the offerings by fire to the Lord, a perpetual debt. So it's a very significant sacrifice. So at the time of the Second Temple, when Jesus was alive, the bread was prepared in the temple or at Bethphage, which was 2 miles east of Jerusalem. It was prepared with great care by the incoming priests. So the priests ministered in weekly shifts, and so on the Sabbath they would change. And so the incoming priests would prepare the bread, and the upper and lower halves of the loaves had to be identical in appearance and color. So they had to be made with a great deal of care. At the very commencement of the Sabbath, there would be a procession into the temple. The bread of the presence would be replaced. And so there's a formal ceremony. And it was regarded as one of the principal temple ceremonies. It's described in 2 Chronicles chapter 13, verses 10 through 11. So the important thing here is that this is one of the principal sacrifices, that it's a sacrifice to God, and that part which is not immolated is eaten. So half of the bread of the presence is eaten by the departing priests. They're eaten during the Sabbath in the temple itself.
So then that's a type of our Eucharist, that it has to be eaten. So if it drops to the ground, you're supposed to pick it up and eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we taught that with, kids at First Communion.
Right, so it's the bread of the face of God. So it's a type of the Eucharist. I think you can sort of very clearly see the element of typology here.
Yeah.
In some sense, I guess you could argue kind of reverse typology. So the light illumines the bread of the presence. We are to illumine Christ, who is our bread of the presence. Does anyone remember Jesus talking about the bread of the presence? No? Let's look at Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 through 6.
I was afraid of that. It's been a long time.
Oh, one of your
On the
studies.
contrary, a few weeks at most, I would think.
12. Okay. Oh, I think that was 2 years ago.
2 years seem like weeks,
I know.
especially when you're having fun, which we all are.
That's right.
Now I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
The field of grain. Yeah.
Right. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, They began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." He said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which it was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here." So something greater than the temple. Let's take a look at the incident that Jesus is referring to. It's in 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 1 through 6. Then David came to Nob to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech came to meet David trembling and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" And David said to Ahimelech the priest, "The king has charged me with the matter and said to me, 'Let no one know anything of the matter about which I send you and with which I have charged you. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. Now then, what have you at hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever is here." And the priest answered David, "I have no common bread at hand, but there is holy bread, if only the young men have kept themselves from women." And David answered the priest, "Of a truth, women have been kept from us as always when I go on an expedition. The vessels of the young men are holy, even when it is a common journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord, to be replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. So David is given the bread of the presence to eat. So priests in the serving in the temple have to be in a state of sexual purity. And so David's army, because they were on an expedition, were in a state of sexual purity. But sexual purity alone doesn't help to explain why they can take the bread of the presence, right? So David is able to take the bread of the presence because he's a priest. And he's not a priest. He's not an Aaronic priest. Let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 14 through 17. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was belted with a linen ephod. There's no description, or there's no detailed description, but that may be a priestly ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the horn. As the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked out of the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. And they brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent which David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And when David had finished offering the burnt offerings and the peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts and distributed among all the people, the whole multitude of Israel, both men and women, to each a cake of bread, a portion of meat, and a cake of raisins. Then all the people departed, each to his house. So David is performing the sacrifice and is then distributing it to the people. So in order for Jesus and his disciples to eat the bread of the presence, what conditions have to be met?
Would it be that he shares it with all the people? As in the loaves and fishes?
Typologically, what types do we have here?
Right. So would it be the loaves and fish?
No. Although, I mean, typologically, the multiplication of the loaves, looks back to manna and the Exodus, and it also looks forward to the Eucharist, and then it looks forward to the heavenly banquet, except for the feeding. That's the feeding of the 5,000. Feeding of the 4,000 only looks forward. It's not
Oh,
typologically backward.
okay.
But so Jesus sees himself as a new David,
Mm.
right? Which would make, so like David can take the bread of the presence, Jesus can take the bread of the presence because he's a new David. And indeed, he's descended from the line of David.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, since the other time that you told us that is no literal with the multiplication of the bread, so how can you explain that, please? Or how can I understand that is not literal, as you are saying right now?
The multiplication, I didn't say it wasn't literal. I think it was
Oh, what,
literal.
like at the, well, maybe I'm, no, what you told that was, well, you said that we have a different understanding and that's what, can you please explain how we supposed to understand that, the multiplication?
Which from what I just said,
No. Well, during the first classes, I remember that you say something about the multiplication and you said that we have a different understanding of that. And you now are referring again, that's why I remember, because I had
Oh.
that question.
Okay. Right. So what I said wasn't that it didn't happen or wasn't real. I said that it's simply a miracle, right? I mean, in the particularly the evangelical understanding, it's, Jesus multiplied loaves, go Jesus, right? So, he multiplied the loaves to feed 5,000, he multiplied the loaves to feed 4,000. So we can add it to the list of miracles, and isn't that nice? But that fails to uncover, that fails to confront or deal with the unity of Scripture. So the multiplication of the loaves. So the 4,000 is an exception because it occurs in Gentile territory and presumably with Gentiles only or predominantly present. So they are not the people of God. They are not Israelites. But the feeding of the 5,000 occurs with Israelites. And so the multiplication of bread, Jesus' multiplication of the bread, is basically that becomes an antitype of manna. That's very comparable to manna, and so therefore it looks forward to the Last Supper, and therefore it also looks beyond the Last Supper. The Last Supper is also, besides being a type of the Eucharist, is also a type of the heavenly banquet. It points forward to the reality of the heavenly banquet, which we'll look at when we finish this typology and and the bread of the presence. So the multiplication of the loaves is an antitype of the manna. So that typology is important. And then the multiplication of the 4,000 points forward to the Eucharist and then to the heavenly banquet. So this is simply more than, this is a nice miracle. We can add it to the list of miracles that Jesus did. Go Jesus. I like miracles. It's much, much richer than that. And when we forget that, we sort of divorce Jesus' ministry from its context, and we lose much of its richness and meaning. And we also take it out of history. That's fundamentally a major problem. We'll discuss that when we discuss the Christian view of history as it was formulated by Saint Vincent of Lorraine. But in some sense, it views God's activity in history as spasmodic and incidental, and that's not the case at all. So does that help to answer your question, Rosario?
Yeah, because now I understand that the miracle happened, and that with my little knowledge of the Bible, so
Right.
I understand that happened and there was a miracle. Because when you told me that we have a different understanding, I was thinking like, well, maybe it is not true. Maybe it's because he feed the people, but with the knowledge or the understanding about the word of the Lord, and that was my confused idea, or yeah.
Uh-huh.
But now I had.
So
Thank you very much.
when we're dealing with Jesus' miracles, we always have to look beyond the miracle for the meaning of the miracle. Miracles are just not random, and the gospel writers are not presenting them to compile a list of accomplishments. Each miracle has a point. And so, for example, Jesus comes down from the Sermon on the Mount, and the first thing he does is he touches a beggar, not a beggar, a leper. That is strictly prohibited and renders him unclean. So why does he touch a leper? Because whenever the clean touches the unclean, the unclean becomes clean. The prevailing view is that whenever the unclean touches the clean becomes unclean. So Jesus reverses that. So, that's just another example. But the point is that the miracles are not, sort of things in themselves. The miracles have profound significance. And it's really important to remember that, because then we just end up with, I don't know, sort of a superficial faith, a faith that's not tied to anything, that doesn't have any roots, that doesn't, sort of appreciate God's constant activity in the world.
Yeah, I know. And that is what Terry says, that sometimes we don't want to see, or we don't have to compromise, and the way that they teach is the way that something that is just like a light, no more profound. And yeah, that's the interest that everyone has to work on. So yeah, thank you.
So Jesus is identifying himself as a type of David. He's also identifying himself as a priest, right? Because David was a priest. David was a priest of the order of Melchizedek. So Jesus is identifying himself as a priest, and he's identifying his disciples as priests, since they can eat the bread of the presence as well. So he's saying, I am like King David and my disciples are like his followers. We are priests because David was a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And they can work on the Sabbath because the priests were required to work to fulfill the law, God's law of the Sabbath, to bake the bread, to put on the table, on the bread of the presence. And so Jesus is saying his disciples can work on the Sabbath because they have the same position as priests. And something greater than the temple is here. And that something is Jesus. Jesus supplants the temple. So the temple was seen as God's dwelling place on earth. And what made the temple holy was that God was present in it. So if the temple is God's dwelling, what can be greater than it?
God.
God, God himself tabernacling in the flesh. The tabernacle means to pitch a tent. The original tabernacle of Moses was a tent. So is that clear?
I believe so.
Yes.
We'll probably return to Jesus as the new temple when we're doing like the book of when we're doing eschatology and the rapture, since there's this view that the temple is supposed to be rebuilt so that Christ can reign in it for 1,000 years. Animal sacrifices resume too, and then Christ comes and he can reign in the new rebuilt temple with ongoing animal sacrifices for 1,000 years. And that's just ridiculous. That's a complete denial of the fundamental tenets of Christianity. Jesus is the temple. We're almost out of time, but before, let's look at the heavenly banquet, which is in Isaiah chapter 25, starting at verse 6. This is really a foundational verse, a centerpiece of both Jewish and Christian eschatology. On this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of fat things, a feast of choice wines, of fat things full of marrow, of choice wines well refined. And he will destroy on this mountain the covering that is cast over all peoples, the veil that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces, and the reproach of his people he will take away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken. It will be said on that day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for him that he might save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. Let us be glad and rejoice in his salvation. So a feast of fat things and of choice wines. So that's the heavenly banquet. And so the Eucharist looks forward to the heavenly banquet. So it points forward to heavenly realities.
Aw.
So notice that's the language is all inclusive, a feast for all peoples. It was interpreted by the rabbis in Jesus' time as meaning Jews of the diaspora. So God would gather together his people from the diaspora. And for Jesus, it represents God's drawing together all people. There's also a reverse type of the banquet, which in Revelation, which we won't get to tonight, since although I really like it, it's the Feast of the Fowl. The birds eat people up.
Oh, lovely. Well, that's our next topic. Eschatology and the rapture. When we're ready.
Yeah. But I next we'll do the Eucharistic controversy with Radbertus and Ratramnus and Berengarius. And then after
Okay,
that,
from that reading.
yeah,
Yeah.
then also I'll try to find something concise about transubstantiation that we can read. And maybe with some luck, we'll do those all next week. Then what I'd like to do, it probably would be a good point to pause and watch a video on YouTube about, it's by this evangelical pastor named Alan Parr, and it's titled "Are Catholics Christians?" So he's very fair, and he leaves it as an open-ended question for his individual listener to decide whether we're Christians or not. And, he notes the similarities, and then he notes the ways in which we differ. So it's
Quite entertaining, is it?
It's outrageous. It shows. He has some really good videos, especially where he looks at like Seventh-day Adventists and sort of other Christian groups that he considers somewhat heretical. But here he really has not done the work and has repeated well-worn cliches. But the well-worn cliches reflect what people commonly think, and evidently they reflect what some Catholics commonly think too. So it would be good, we're at greater than a halfway point, but I think we are at least. But it would be good to, sort of pause and see where we are, and how do you respond to the contentions made in the video, which are, one's commonly encountered.
Wow.
It's not from nowhere that he's getting all of this misinformation.
Yeah.
So we are out of time. Are there